Good evening. I'd like to call to order the October 28th, 2025 work session. I'd like to announce that the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. Move on to item 4, curriculum. I'm going to read all 4 into the record right now, as some of them will potentially cross over. 4.01, new course proposal, entrepreneurship. 4.02, new course proposal, lifeguarding. 4.03, new course proposal, sports nutrition. 4.04, approval of curriculum maps, science. Dr. Bitts.
Thank you. Yeah, a few exciting courses and some heavy work that has been done in science here over the last couple of years. And I'll invite Mrs. Woodall, who's going to come up and be our point guard to help us navigate who all is going to be coming up for each one of these. And,
right, I'm going to be the point guard guy. So I'm going to sit over here off to this side, just because we have a lot of going on, like a lot of presentations going on today, just to inform you of everything that's going on with our academic program. So with that, first, I'm going to have Ms. Tasha Clever come up and discuss our next first course. Sorry.
Hi. All right. So I'll start with just a little bit of rationale behind why we are considering offering the entrepreneurship elective. We know the world of work is changing pretty drastically, and there are a lot of unknowns, but I would say one thing we do know is that there's an increased interest, especially among teenagers, to be self-employed rather than to have a traditional job. And that's an interest that we see confirmed at the federal level. The Department of the Treasury in 2024 reported that there were 50% more new business applications than in 2019, so a pretty significant jump. And the relevance of entrepreneurship is reflected at the education level too. So at the state level, the most updated career education and workforce standards, 2 out of 20 of those standards directly reference entrepreneurship, and then both the state and the national BCIT standards have bands that are specific to entrepreneurship. So at MASH, we also see an increased student interest in business electives overall. We've had to raise the sections that we're offering the last couple of years, so we know there's an interest, and we'd love to be able to offer a more diverse selection of course offerings for students. In terms of where we currently focus on entrepreneurship within the curriculum, like I said, it is reflected in the CEW standards, so it is part of our 9th grade career development coursework. But what we're doing with students in that class is really focused on something called the entrepreneurial mindset. So it's really about traits, creativity, resilience, risk tolerance, adaptability, and helping students to see how embodying traits like that can be beneficial both in their personal and professional lives. So it's not necessarily specific to starting your own business and pitching to investors and all that goes into entrepreneurship. We do also talk about it briefly within both the Intro to Business course as well as the Advanced Business course, but just given the scope of those courses and the amount of content that they have within their curriculum, entrepreneurship ends up being more of like a bite-sized component of the overall curriculum, and this course would really allow us to do more of a deep dive into that content area. So yeah, we saw a need, we saw an interest, and we went to the teachers and asked for their input, and I do have to give a shout out to Rebecca Erickson, one of our BCI teachers at MASH. She was a large part of developing what you see in the proposal for the course overview. And I'll just talk briefly about that. The curriculum is rooted in both the BCIT transfer goals and understandings as well as the career education transfer goals and understandings. And the overall goal of the course is really for students to have a true project-based learning experience where they're taking on the role of an entrepreneur. And so from start to finish, idea generation, really establishing where there's a need in the market for a new product or a service, all the way up to venture creation and pitching a business model to investors. In terms of the course overview, I do just want to take a second to read through what the unit questions are for the course, because I think what they do is they reveal really the richness of the scope of that curriculum. What does it mean to think like an entrepreneur? How does understanding the human side of business drive stronger teams, better products, and lasting success? How can I create solutions that matter? How can I transform ideas into a sustainable business model? And what does it take to launch and sustain a business that is both profitable and principled? So again, I think that just speaks to the rich learning experience that I think students can have in a course like this. We are hoping to really capitalize on some additional opportunities, like bringing in former alum who are thriving as entrepreneurs in our local community to talk about their own experiences, especially to share what the challenges are of starting your own business. Because of course many young people like the idea of being self-employed, they don't always recognize what that looks like or what it means. And so yeah, we're really excited for the opportunity and for the potential of the course to grow.
ECIT?
Yes.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah, business, computers, and information technology. It's essentially our business department.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So will the students actually come up with an idea in the course of the semester? They'll build on it and market it, make a plan, and
Yeah.
present it to a team of people or something,
Yeah.
like they're presenting?
Yes, exactly. So they'll, we want them to, when they're coming up with ideas, it's not just sort of like a cold call for what are you thinking. We want them to be thinking about ideas that are grounded in like what the market research says in terms of where there's a need or a problem that they're trying to solve. So it'll really be more of an innovative mindset approach to entrepreneurship. But yes, that is the basic concept for the course overview.
Do you plan on giving the kids like a personality test at the beginning of this? Because you were talking about the personality traits that somebody
Yeah, they
would be
actually,
more successful
that's a good question. As part of the career development course in 9th grade, they take a number of assessments, and some of those are personality assessments. And part of the focus there is we talk a lot about aligning your career interests with your personality, your skill sets, your values, and really thinking about themselves holistically rather than just what they're good at. So they are coming into the course hopefully with that background, and if they're taking it as a 9th grader, it'll be fresh for them for sure. But yes, that's something we'll have them thinking pretty intentionally about, is whether it's a pathway that actually makes sense for them.
I think a bunch of them would self-select, like if you did a personality assessment, it would be a real close cluster anyway.
Yeah.
They chose a class.
Yeah, just reviewing this, it's incredibly comprehensive, and I think, as you said, it's going to also transfer to other aspects of their career, even if they don't choose entrepreneurship. Of course, I hope they do, as an entrepreneurship. And as an entrepreneur, I definitely think this is everything I've learned in college, and probably everything I've learned in doing it for 3 years. So, great job putting that together.
Thank you. Sounds like we might be reaching out to you.
I'd love to share.
I'm sure you'll talk about the pitfalls and the non-successful attempts.
Yeah. Learning from failure is a huge part of it, absolutely.
You envision if there's 30 kids, based on the question earlier on, developing their own things, are there going to be 30 business plans, or are they going to be focusing on working together to come up with these? I might be too in the weeds for this idea. But.
Yeah, that's certainly something we'd have to determine, once we have course numbers and we've looked a little bit more intentionally at unit plans. But I think the idea of a collaborative approach certainly has value for students, so it's something we can consider for sure.
Before she steps away, I've got to brag about Tasha here for a minute, because a couple years ago at about this time, we were wrestling with how to bring some continuity and cohesiveness across a number of different programs and projects and initiatives that we had in the district. You know, when you think about graduation project, and then you think about some of these departments that are smaller but have these very career-oriented tracks to them. When you talk about BCIT and FCS, and then you look at our internships and our co-ops and all these different areas where we're really focusing on how do we help students prepare for their next steps. And they were a little scattered, lots of good things, but we needed somebody to help bring some continuity across them. And she has done an amazing job with being able to do just that and provide leadership in these areas. And this course is just one small peek into the work that she's been doing, but she's been doing a great job.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for all that work you've been doing.
Yeah, of course.
Amazing job.
And now representing our Health and Physical Education Department, Mrs. Brumbaugh and I will be speaking about 2 of the course proposals coming up for that. Hello.
Hello there.
So the first course that we're going to talk about is lifeguarding. So you know that we have had a huge investment in our pool at the high school. So our Health and Physical Education Department, they've been looking for ways to be able to utilize that pool to benefit our students, not just as a whole, but maybe start looking at some career aspects for how they can use that pool. So they have introduced a course for lifeguarding, which is following the American Red Cross's curriculum for becoming a certified lifeguard. So this course would be a semester-long course, and it would meet as a typical physical education elective. So 1 day of 6-day cycle, entire block period. And that would give students 1 credit for their course. And then at the end of it, they have the opportunity to take the certification test to become a certified lifeguard. Now, because of that, we are capped off at 12 students for the course. That's based off the American Red Cross recommendations for their curriculum. But we are very excited. We have a teacher who is ready to go and get her training to become a certified instructor to instruct the students. And we are excited and ready to go with that. So you can look and see how it is tied in with our transfer goals for health and physical education. So this is looking at, again, that lifelong learning that is necessary for our students to be able to live a happy, healthy life as they move forward. And then we've also tied in the Pennsylvania Health and Education Standards, which are in the process of being revamped. And maybe the state will get those out here sooner or later. But we've also looked at what does that look like at the national level as well. And you can see our units that we have bridged out, again, based off of the American Red Cross curriculum. So that's a pretty brief presentation on it, but it's a very exciting class, and I can't wait for it to start.
Another path for students to take this class, get certified, and actually make money.
Yeah.
Hopefully working for us or for.
I was gonna say, for like our rec programs and things like that, it's really a way to help funnel in, because lifeguards are needed. It's
Absolutely.
hard to get certified lifeguards right now.
It's a good, great summer job. I did it from high school into college, and absolutely.
If it's in there, I missed it. Is there an age restriction on that, or?
It is for juniors and seniors, so we're looking at 16 and up.
I didn't know if the Red Cross had a standard on
I-
to actually get the certification right, I guess.
I think they do, but I'm not positive if it's 16. It might be a little bit lower.
I think it's
Did
lower.
say 16? Okay, so it is 16.
So basically, anybody that would take the course should be of the age to, right, or shortly thereafter where they can
Yes.
take it. Right.
So minimum number of students should accept? Is that all about scheduling?
Well, it's because the American Red Cross.
I know
wants
the
to-
12, but I mean less, if you had only 5 sign up, would you still offer it?
That would be up to Mr. Reedy and looking at, how does that work within his schedule.
PE's the one that we have oftentimes a little bit more flexibility with, because we have a number of teachers that are assigned to a particular period, and then they kind of break up into different size groups anyway. So all that to say, there's often a little bit more flexibility.
It's a great course.
I feel like you're hand designing these courses for my kids, but I think it's also good to see that investment into the aquatics community so obviously you need lifeguards to do anything, so, it's very good to have those courses.
Question relates to, well, I guess I should ask this for the first course too, but this one I understand doesn't seem like there's a staff impact at all because of the way PE is already designed, but what are the rest of the impacts to offering one on entrepreneurship and then the other classes too? Anything do we foresee with adding staff, considering more?
Yeah, often when we're looking at electives like these, each of these is kind of in a little bit of a different boat because entrepreneurship is a major that meets every day. So
Yeah.
that has the potential to have a little bit more of an impact as opposed to this one, which again does have a little more flexibility. And then the next one, which is one of our day 6 electives, which has a great bit more flexibility. But with electives, there's always a little bit more flexibility, and it does sometimes come down to numbers about, okay, well, how many kids are interested in this? And if we do need another section of career development over here, does that mean that we can't offer it this semester, but we could offer it next semester? So at this point, it's not something that we would need to add staff for any of these, versus something like personal finance last year where every student had to take that, so we knew that we had to add a teacher.
Well, that was the state.
That was connected to a state, I think. So it always depends on what is the makeup of the course, what flexibility we have.
I took lifeguarding through the rec department, so that may be an option if that doesn't work for, you had 5 instead of 12 or something. I don't know. Plus also those initial costs, I always felt like all that stuff was just at the pool all the time, the backboard and all the other stuff, so maybe cheaper than we think to do this.
Great course, great idea. Any other questions?
Last one, sports nutrition.
All right, so this course, as Dr. Bitts was saying, is another one of our day 6 offerings. So we've been really trying to take advantage of that time period to branch out with some high interest courses. We've been really proud of our PE and health department overall and their creativity in the way they offer things. And this is a course that Katie Hanford helped write, and she's a middle school teacher who actually has a doctorate in the area. So this was a labor of love for her, writing the course. And we don't see it just for athletes. It's really in response to a lot that's out there in the media about fad diets and enhancements, misinformation that's out there for students. So she's hoping to kind of close that misinformation gap and bring some students in the day 6 course.
I think it's worth highlighting again what you mentioned there because Mrs. Hanford is currently at the middle school. And this is at least 2 courses that we've had of day 6 courses offered at the high school where middle school teachers have had a major hand in developing the course and perhaps even teaching it.
Yes.
So
She's hopeful.
It's pretty cool to see that connection and collaboration between those schools.
I was curious if someone could tell me, and I don't really expect you to be able to tell me this, if someone from, maybe if that person was here, they might
Yes.
know. A concussion nutrition protocol.
So I do know, like, we do have our concussion protocols.
That I understand, yeah, but nutrition protocol?
Part of the healing process actually with concussions relates to
What you need?
nutrition.
I didn't have it. Oh.
Portion I know from.
So we have one specifically.
Yeah.
We have one just for our school. I mean, it has a protocol. So that's interesting. Learn something new.
I was been tracking.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Good idea.
And get diet. And like I said, swimmer, who's concerned about.
Great. Any other questions on this course?
Just talking to himself, I think.
So this type of course is very important for athletes.
That's great.
Because sometimes they think that they need to cut calories or
Mhm.
something. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so thank you. Yes.
You mentioned the overlap with health and FCS. in here a little bit. And so I wonder, you know, what will the impact be on that, or is it not, there's no overlap at all? Or these are great ideas and concepts, could they be used to improve the existing curriculum?
Yes, I know in FCS they also talk about nutrition a lot, but it's just not through this specific lens, the sports and nutrition. I think one of the great things about our teachers is they have those conversations about overlap and try to align so that students, sometimes they need exposures through different lenses, and sometimes we're careful to just say, you do this, you do that. But yeah.
In some ways, it's almost a little bit of a connection to what we were talking about with entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is touched on in other courses, but this really is, as Tasha was saying, a deeper dive. In similar ways, there's a number of health courses that touch on nutrition, but this is an opportunity really to dig.
Any other questions on sports nutrition? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And last but not least, you've all seen in your board docs a link to 104 science curriculum level maps for our K-12 science curriculum that we've spent a very, very long time putting together to help with organizing our units from the K-12 level. With that, I have Dr. Einsig. He is here with Ms. Thornton and Ms. Porter to talk about what science looks like and some of the professional learning that they've been going through over the years that we're also emulating with 4th and 5th grade this year. So if you guys would love to come up.
Sure, you can let the cat out of the bag, yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. So people are going to interrupt with
There are toys.
activities. We'll get to those.
Before you start, Nathan, if I did before, I just wanted to publicly congratulate you on earning your doctorate.
Thanks.
We always appreciate seeing our staff reach that.
I appreciate the
milestone.
support in getting there. This year's been great for that.
I know it's a lot of work, I know you put a lot of time into it, so
Thank you.
congratulations.
Congratulations.
On behalf of the board.
Thank you.
Now that you're embarrassed, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to talk about Steele's curriculum in general, and there's a focus of science, but it does extend past that, and some of the things we'll get into here. And looking at the date there, 2025, this is a long time coming. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this. A lot of hard work has gone into this. At the secondary level with Mrs. Broombaugh and our teachers, we're doing a lot of hard work with Mrs. Bachman and elementary at this point. There is still work to be done, but there's a lot that we've accomplished. So looking at that time and kind of going back, it was the summer of 2019. Can we remember that? That was before some big events that the world experienced. And that summer, Adriana pulled a small group of science teachers together to look at where are we with the curriculum, how are things, how do we lean forward into something more modern. The state standards for a long time were in a kind of stuck in a draft mode. And it was kind of like, we can't wait. We know we need to be doing some more things. And so that led to a look at the national level standards of the next generation science standards, which we'll get to. But we really started that summer with some simple questions. Why are we teaching science? What do we want our students to walk away with out of a science experience? at any level. And we asked ourselves that through various PD experiences and trainings. We kept asking that question. And you start to get answers along the line of, I want my students to be able to solve problems and collaborate, be critical thinkers, productive members of society, persist through problems or issues, take on the challenges of the world. You start to really see our mission wrap around the answers to those two questions. And very rarely, if at all, the answer was, because I want them to be a geologist or be a biologist. That was not in the answers. Obviously, we're going to equip some students for careers in that direction. But it wasn't that narrow focus. It was providing skills for all of our students, no matter what they end up doing after they graduate and move on into the real world. So it's not just standards that were driving this as well. Why take this on? Why grapple with something modern and shift our practice in our science courses? We want robust experiences. We want deep learning. We want students to be fluent in solving problems, that kind of scientific thinking, churning through scientific information, and really just information about the world around us. That interconnectedness. We see science as a way where everyone has a seat at the table. And if we approach science in a way that connects to one's experiences, their community, their local environment, we start answering some of those questions or problems around inclusion and equity and having students who may traditionally not see themselves as something that science lines up with. All of a sudden they see, oh, I do have a place here. We also owe it to our students. There's almost this moral imperative, right? Because this way of thinking, no matter what your career, is going to help solve those challenges of the world. It also leans into career readiness. We know that the ways of thinking, the technologies are advancing so fast, that's refreshing overall in the workforce every 5 to 6 years. So someone who is just getting out of undergrad now, their high school experience is already kind of out of date unless we really start looking forward at a skills-based processing approach. So was kind of that compelling why beyond just there's some standards we need to address. There's some important things to tackle. So the state version of the standards are called STEELS. It is an acronym because we can't get away from those in education. It's a mouthful. It stands for science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability. That's a lot. That also goes out past what we might traditionally package as the science curriculum or science standards. Okay? How do we get to that? Well, this is rooted in some really phenomenal research. In 2012, the National Research Council put out a publication called A Framework for K-12 Science Education, and it was challenging the country to, do you really want to do a modern version of science and engineering? What does that look like? And so they spent years doing research on how do students best learn these skills, these transferable ways of thinking at each grade level. And so there's a lot of work in there into what's appropriate at each grade band. When you look at the maps, you'll see them organized in those bands. It's on purpose. There are limits. There are things that shouldn't be in certain parts of the timeline, and that's all rooted in the research. From that framework came the next generation science standards. So again, around 2012 is when they're getting published. They've been out there for a while. Pennsylvania, around the pandemic, started to, in earnest, indicate that they were going to adopt NGSS in some form. The final version of that is STEELS, and that's what we're presenting today. Essentially, they adopted the NGSS version and then added some Pennsylvania flavor to it, as they tend to do. One of the things actually that is beneficial that was enhanced from the national version is the technology sector and the environmental pieces. They're bolstered. That was a criticism of the national level early on, and they have enhanced that. Still think we could get better, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. Not to get deep in the weeds of the research, but what this really is getting at is how do we think scientifically? How do we solve problems? We need students to be doing science at an age-appropriate manner, sparking curiosity, trying to explain things that they see in the world around them, things that are happening. So we are so much more in the sense-making business than we are in the knowing things about science that someone else figured out, right? The memorizing of science facts. Those things come into play, but the focus is so much on the doing. Another piece that we'll look at here in a moment is we're kind of shifting away from that traditional scientific method that we all learned in school at some point. It's not really how most people engaging in science or engineering are behaving. It's not what they're doing. It's very rare these days that you would follow that kind of scripted list of steps and just kind of loop back. It's messier than that, and that's what we're trying to equip kids for. So why bring the tech piece in? As you know, I also am the coordinator for the tech ed department. That's a new role for me. It's just that I'm in year 3. We are working on this as well on the technology side. This is informing what we do in tech ed in our engineering courses. And that makes sense, right? If we know anything about STEM, we know it's the marriage of those worlds, applying technology, leveraging technology to help us understand the place we live, but also solve those problems that are out there, to satisfy kind of those human needs, really. And so that's where that marriage comes into play. So how do we do this? It all starts with a phenomenon. And I think I spoke to you at one point in the last 2 years or so about the basics of a phenomenon. I think we were talking about hydroponics. But just a little refresher. This is just something that happens in nature, an event, it's observable. We could simulate it sometimes, like sometimes we can't just like bring the sun into the classroom, right? So we have to do something that might simulate a situation, but it's still observable. A good phenomenon should also be interesting. It should pique curiosity. It may be stated simply, but it should be complex in how it works. So we can tackle or go at a phenomenon with a second grader and then look at it maybe in 11th or 12th grade physics, and we're getting into a deeper explanation, right? It should be scalable. And so a phenomenon looks like what's on the image there. Water disappears from a puddle on a hot day, right? That's the phenomenon. We know that the water cycle is part of that explanation, but instead of just saying, oh, we're going to learn about the water cycle today, we're hooking students in to solve something and figure something out and explain it. And along the way, they will understand the water cycle through that. Right? So our next step is you're going to start that process here in just a second. Once we have a phenomenon presented, though, how do we get students to explain it, to understand it, to do something with it? And it really hinges on these 3 dimensions. And this is laid out in the national standards. It's laid out in the state STEEL standards. And those 3 dimensions sit as cross-cutting concepts, core ideas, and science or engineering practices. The core ideas are just the information that we know from the canon of science research over time, human understanding. We might look at those as traditional standards. It's the facts. Practices are how we engage scientifically, how we think about things, how we start to solve problems and really do the science. That's the practices. And then cross-cutting concepts are things like ways of thinking, things that show up in really any subject. So it doesn't matter if we're in biology or science or chemistry, we would see cross-cutting concepts show up. Those are things like cause and effect or observing patterns, understanding that things work in a system. Those are cross-cutting concepts. Practices are those transferable skill pieces, developing models, thinking and utilizing mathematics, thinking mathematically or applying mathematics, analyzing data, gathering and analyzing data, thanks. There's 8 of them. Arguing from evidence, developing investigations. So all of those things that we would do to tackle a problem. We build lessons, we're building units around these phenomena, underpinning the task that the students will take on by these 3 dimensions. So we're giving them those tools, and then they have to do it. And they have time to make errors and make mistakes and then correct them as we would in the real world. So let's give this a try. Right? The idea here is we want curiosity, right? And I love this quote from Carl Sagan: curiosity and the urge to solve problems are the emotional hallmarks of our species. I think that's pretty awesome. So let's hopefully get a little bit curious right now. You all have Slinkies, or someone near you has a Slinky. Take it out of the box, pair up with someone nearby. We're gonna have to stand up for that.
Yeah, right, how do you open it? I was trying to be nice about it.
All right, so the phenomenon is if you hold a Slinky vertically, just over the ground, and let go of it, so the whole thing should be suspended. You can stand up to do it, hold it up high, and let it loose, right? And then once it's kind of steady, and hold it up high, let go of it, and just see what happens. Just let go. Do you notice anything? It fell. Now, I'm going to let you do that a couple times with your seat partners, and I want you to make some observations. What are some unique things that are happening with that?
Ours did.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Always goes on the side. Go from high.
Ready?
On a 4 lane.
Slow-mo recording.
And the other parts.
I know what they're
It's like going
Slow
up.
motion.
Good. Appreciate that.
We'll be on tape.
Am I
Yeah.
telling you what I'm observing?
Come together.
Come up and that's how it goes down.
Go again, see if it's
It goes, it's around.
It's so fast, I can't tell.
It all depends. If you look at the spring, the spring is forward. Yeah, for sure. So why? Yeah. Yeah.
What if it's so tiny and still when it's on
This part says, but it's always driven by the absent part.
That part doesn't show until the top part.
How is this not stretching? Are we, gonna be my question. How are we calling this 3-dimensional fantasy? Yeah.
Where it's flowing.
Yeah. It does slow down.
Right. So this doesn't move. Whereas as we're expanding down, it lets it move.
Yeah, they do.
This is the Pennsylvania part, right? Because it was made in Pennsylvania, that's how we have to invent it here.
All right.
One more time.
All right, folks, we'll pull back together here, do any last bit of observations. I saw some things like videotape happening, which is excellent. This is a great thing to view in slow motion. But it is viewable just live. I'm gonna let Abby and Lindsay collect some of your observations.
Sure.
'Cause they know how to do this.
So I am curious about the pair that was videotaping. What did you discover
Okay,
in
well, there's
taping it?
There's an obvious thing, but there's one that I think is less obvious, which is it seems to go fast and then slow up as it reaches the bottom.
Interesting. Did anybody else notice anything about the pace that it was falling or build on that pattern?
We noticed that the top fell before the bottom fell.
Okay. Is that what you would expect to
So
happen?
it compressed, it retracted before it hit the floor.
Okay.
Yes and no.
The top came down, but the
Right.
bottom also came up,
Mhm.
and it met in the middle, and then that's what we felt caused the movement to horizontal.
It all depended on the direction as it was coming up. If you let it go, it first compressed before it fell to the ground. If it was expanding down and you let it go, it went straight down. It didn't compress as much first. It let it hit the ground first, and then it started to
Right.
compress. So it's the direction of the energy that is taking place that determined whether it was going to collapse first and fall, or whether it was just going to implode on itself or collapse on itself.
Ours landed on its side every
Always.
single time.
Every time. Interesting.
Yours was broken. That's why.
Yeah.
We had 1 out of 5, we had an anomaly where it landed perfectly vertical.
Oh, really? Nice.
That's like the bottle flipping game that you guys want. So. Now I heard you say energy. Did you find yourselves using words like energy in your descriptions to each other, what was happening, or any other kind of science terms that were coming back to you?
You said inertia,
Steps.
didn't you?
I did say inertia.
Wow.
Inertia.
I threw it out there. I don't know if that's right.
We use the scientific term, stuff is happening.
Uh-huh.
I love the word stuff.
We
Yeah.
use the scientific term arthritis, which ached when we bent over to pick it
By
up.
yourself.
Yeah, that's
We
a,
were
that's a
focusing
different
on the
phenomenon,
cylinder.
but yeah. Did anybody talk about force at all? Any forces come up in your discussions?
So when I let go of the pencil, it's falling, right? What force would be involved?
Gravity.
Right? Gravity interacted on the spring, or on the slinky, but it didn't just all drop, did it? Right? That's the phenomenon, right? The bottom, like if you're holding it and it's not bouncing, right? If it's fairly still and you let go, the bottom will not move until it fully compresses down, right? Now, if you had some of that motion where it's springing either up or down, that is going to bring it up when you let go, or it might just let it drop if it's being pulled down. Did you want to say anything else, Riz?
I was just gonna kind of spoil a little bit what we might have students then do after kind of engaging with a phenomenon like this and having kind of a group talk about it, giving them the core ideas. So they would have the things that are known in science and kind of student-friendly language, but rather than have them sort of try to come up with science themselves, they're using science to explain the phenomenon. So they have the exposure to the phenomenon, they're observing it, they want the words to describe it, so they're primed for that task. And so then oftentimes it will be like a group kind of modeling task where in this kind of an example, and maybe have them show how the forces interact to cause motion in the slinky. So kind of picking those two concepts, forces and motion, and how those things play together in a complex way. So I think the important thing with that modeling task, though, is to keep that curiosity, that kind of fun that you guys are feeling, keep that moving by making sure that it's not precious work. We give them kind of our junkiest big paper for modeling tasks like this. I tell them pencils aren't allowed, use markers and make it big and bold so everybody can see your thinking. mistakes are a part of that process, draw it, cross it out, think it kind of out on paper as they're making sense of that phenomenon.
So you keep using the term phenomenon,
Yes.
whereas I think phenomenon is something like major, spectacular, that
Right.
hard to explain.
Yeah.
But something, well, I guess if you really tried to explain exactly what was happening with the slinky, it might be also a phenomenon. But it just, to me, the term just sounds,
Too
I
big.
just moved a slinky. I didn't do anything phenomenal where it's a phenomenon. I just moved a slinky from one place to another, but
When I would do the training, one of the phenomenons that they actually presented us with, and didn't give us much of the science behind it either, because we were adults and they're saying, here, figure it out. It was basically how a volcano moves over time. And they gave you the data, which it took us a while really to, I mean, it wasn't like, oh, well, a volcano moves over time and here's how it happens. Like, that just didn't happen instantly for us. I mean, there was the whole process they go through, we had to go through as adults too, and then finally kind of put the pieces together, that realizing that this is how it happens.
okay.
And I think in the beginning, there's a draw for teachers learning how to do this, that every phenomenon has to be this flashy
Right.
phenomenon, right? Exactly what you're getting at. And sometimes that can happen, right? But sometimes, the world can be simple and elegant and not flashy, but that doesn't mean there isn't an explanation to mine out of that occurrence. Yeah.
Like today's category 5 hurricane. I mean, that's
That's a
phenomenal.
Yeah, and it certainly, that one certainly could be like how it is when it's broken, records that have stood for over 100 years, for the wind speeds at landfall. Something like that could certainly be a phenomenon.
And we would probably go in the route of not that a hurricane happened, but say from August to October, hurricanes are more common around North America, right? That's the phenomenon. You have to figure out why that is.
Or I have one that I've used in meteorology with a map that shows the hurricane tracks over time. And so they can recognize the concentration of lines that the paths hurricanes take across the ocean and why they're only in these latitudes, but there's like nothing at the equator. And why,
Cape Canaveral is where it is in Florida because they don't ever have hurricanes there, and I don't know why. Why would that be? That would be a phenomenon.
We need to figure that out.
That's your-
See, your
That's
curiosity
right.
is built.
The aliens have a shelter around
And
it.
we probably didn't think
Triangle,
this was
right?
phenomenal. We've been playing with these for 60 years, so.
The phrase spread reaction is equal opposite reaction. Is that was I just kind of like remembering high school?
You're right.
Yeah, and that will happen where students will want to have like an answer and they'll start to throw out some of those vocab words, right? Or throw out a law that they remember or a phrase. And sometimes I'll say like, wow, that's a really good vocab word. How does that help explain this?
Right.
And getting past I'm gonna match a piece of knowledge to what I'm seeing, I'm gonna use this knowledge to explain.
Right.
And that I think is where a phenomenon really starts to get phenomenal and exciting for the students because they can be watching condensation form on the outside of a glass of ice water. But when you start to really pick apart what they think they understand, and not in a mean way, but just in a obnoxious 3-year-old niece or nephew kind of way where they're just like, but why? But why? And you just keep digging until they get to that edge of what they know and understand and what they don't. And that's really where we want them spending their time and putting their effort into making sense of the world, like you said.
You're getting a taste of why I asked these two
Channel.
So, before I let them talk a little more, this is not just a curriculum process with standards, right? The district invested heavily in training. It's kind of like 2 trains running at the same time. There's the building the curriculum around standards, but then there's the instructional practices shift. And every single one of our teachers has shifted the way they're doing business in the classroom. Not that we were doing bad things before. We had phenomenal science teachers. But the change was hard sometimes. It's easy to say why tension is causing the slinky to counteract against gravity for a moment, and then gravity wins the battle. We could tell them that in 30 seconds, but they wouldn't have an understanding of what is tension and why does that happen, and what are maybe some other examples like this and implications, right, as we get into engineering and aerospace is something related to that. So, the reason I wanted the two of them to come in is because what they have done in their lesson planning and the experiences they're developing for students in 8th and 9th grade, and Lindsay and AP Environmental as well, it is just incredible. The way they were already good teachers, doing great things, and they have just taken to this and done amazing things for our students. And I think that's what we need to come back to, is how are students impacted through this change? And they can speak to that because they see it happening. So can you two talk about that?
Well, one of the experiences that I remember is how hard this shift was, how like uncomfortable students were when we started using this style of teaching, because they were really used to this sort of, just the kind of teaching that we grew up with, like, I'm going to give you some information, you're going to memorize it, and then eventually you're going to recite it to me or push it back out on a test, and then you're going to get a grade and we're going to move on. And I remember students being really uncomfortable when we started this process of like, so if this phenomenon was happening in my classroom, like kids would have the entire period to play with the slinkies, to investigate. Love the videotaping. Nobody's allowed to Google anything. Nobody's allowed to like get the answer really quickly. They would just be investigating with slinkies. And one thing I noticed that happened with y'all when we asked you to stop was that everybody was like smiling and you were enjoying yourself, you were engaged in the activity. And so it took some time for kids to get comfortable with like, I don't expect you to fill out a worksheet today. I just want you to engage with this thing and pick up all the details about it that you can. And so it was very uncomfortable for students in the beginning, especially those early years. So I teach 8th grade, and it took a couple of years of kids had done it in 6th grade, they'd done it in 7th, and now they're coming to me for their 3rd year. And so it's a little more comfortable over time. But there's definitely more, motivation that's based on curiosity and sort of, piquing their interest. Like you said, Dr. Bowman, that you still remember the phenomenon you had at training. Like I'll never forget the one I did at training, which was when you mow your grass, it grows back. But when you cut a flower or a tree branch, it doesn't grow back. And I was just like fascinated by it, and like I'll never forget that experience of like just like the drive to like figure out like why is that, I never considered that kind of things. And so there's definitely, we've definitely changed from how we used to teach was this rote memorization and things to this sort of like, I'm gonna pique your curiosity with something, and I want that to like fuel your drive to figure this out and then explain it to me. And so we have these experiences that you had a lot. So one is like the relevance piece, like doing the hurricane would be a great phenomenon, but you had like a personal connection to it that you were able to bring to the table. So that's always very motivating to kids. Like, hold on a second, my family vacations down there. Why aren't there ever hurricanes there? So that's always wonderful. I really love the phenomenon that are not very flashy. Like, so one of the ones that I wrote it after I like burned my hand cooking soup with a wooden spoon and a metal spoon. And so we developed the hot or not spoon phenomenon out of that. And so I bring in a pot and we cook pretend soup that is actually hot chocolate in the classroom. And the kids watch me like burn my hand on the metal spoon. So they
as long
really
as it's not the kids.
Yeah, so they really enjoy that. And stuff. There's another one that we do that the kids really enjoy where I like pull a kid aside ahead of class and we set their cell phone alarm so that their cell phone will go off in their backpack a couple minutes into class. And they get like scolded for it, but we can't tell where the cell phone's coming from. And none of the kids are gonna admit that it's their phone that's making the noise, because if I can't figure out who it is, then I can't take the phone. And then my phone goes off 30 seconds later. And so that's a phenomenon about sound and how does sound travel and how do solids and different substances affect sound and things like that. So it's very relevant for students. So they really enjoy that one where they can pull in something that's very relevant to them that they know very well. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that relevance piece is one of the ways that this can be really impactful, but it also is very challenging as a teacher to, you can't just adopt like lessons from other sources, like they really have to be sort of homegrown and, what are the things that you're going to be able to use to connect the content we do teach in the class that can also be relevant and experienced by students. And so teaching earth and space science, it can be challenging. Some of the space concepts that we want to teach students about, we can't bring into the classroom. Like Dr. Einzig said, you can't bring the sun into the room. So, one of the things we teach early in the course is about the formation of the solar system and the different forces that bring a giant cloud of dust and gas and nebula and cause it to sort of contract into a star and maybe some crumbs around the edges like planets. And we have adopted a phenomenon that I call dust bunny detectives, where they investigate how dust bunnies form in houses. Not theirs, of course, because their parents are very tidy, but other homes or where do you find the dust bunnies? What patterns do you notice with that? And it's a great one to start off because it's not something they can Google. It's just not out there on the internet. Tons of information about how dust bunnies form, and so they do have to kind of dig in and apply the different pieces of science that we teach and then use it to explain this phenomenon of the dust bunnies. But then that empowers them by the end of the first unit to use the science to explain how solar systems form and how our Earth and everything took shape. And so that transferability is really what we're going for. You can find analogous phenomena that will enable them to explain really complex astronomical phenomena, the very flashy ones, the kind of out there. I also did want to say a piece about the equity that you had mentioned too, because I have taught all 3 levels that we have at the high school, and using this approach with kids of all different levels and abilities, English speaking abilities, and the whole range. And I've just found that this is really a way that every kid has a seat at the table to do science. It's very collaborative, and I've found that intentionally grouping kids in ways that sometimes it's really helpful to have kids at similar kind of levels working together. They're making the discoveries kind of that they're ready for, and then this group of kind of high flyers, or those who think they're really high flyers, they're like, we've got the answer, we're good. I can go in and I can look and say, okay, great, now why does this happen? There's always more, there's always a deeper layer, and so everybody's thinking and everybody's processing the whole time, and so I've really appreciated that piece of it. Just that, if you arrange the groupings of, intentionally, it really can be a way for every kid to be engaging and learning and using science in this way. So.
And I think to that point and the challenges that Abby was speaking of at the high school in our leveled courses, the students who were good at memorizing facts and taking kind of traditional tests weren't. With this shift, they like Lindsay said, they just want the right answer. They think they have the right answer, and there was some growing pains with that. And conversely, students who were maybe reluctant in science, didn't see themselves, as for science, or it wasn't for them, are often more prone to asking those simple questions. They're not putting on that air of, oh, I'm going to get it wrong. And they have flourished under this approach. Our students, particularly in level 3, and maybe some of our more reluctant science students in level 2, have just been taking off with this. And we're actually seeing the results of that upstream in some of our advanced science electives, where we have students taking that challenge, going into Lindsay's AP environmental class, and being traditionally in our level 3 program, and they're finding success. It's awesome.
I have a student right now in my AP class that I had as a 9th grader in my level 3 class, and I was talking to him about AP even in 9th grade, and he was like, do you think I could do something like that? And I was like, yeah, I think, you work hard, take these classes, you keep pushing. Yeah, I'll see you in my class when you're a senior, and sure enough, he's there. Yeah, and doing well, so.
That's awesome. So the question with what you were just talking about with the shift away from facts, when we heard from social studies and ELA about the same idea, I got it, that like it doesn't really matter. You can Google when the Spanish-American War ended or whatever.
Sure.
Fine. But I wonder, like, don't we still want to learn the periodic table and how many bones there are in the body and things like that?
Those things are still happening.
Right.
Yeah, when you go back to that 3-dimensional approach, those core ideas, that's there. But we're not just exclusively testing the knowledge of those things. We still have tests, right? We're still assessing some of those pieces for sure. But it's that experience leading up to that and those other measures. That's actually a great question to lead us into the last real piece here. How does this get us to transfer, right? What are our transfer goals? Those are the science and engineering practices, those ways of doing science. Having those be our transfer goals really honors what we've done with Understanding by Design, our backwards design, and all of the components of our curriculum assessment and instruction system. We're leading into that problem-solving piece, right? We need to know facts. We need to understand certain known things of the natural world and science and engineering to do that, right? But it's not the only thing we're assessing. Our performance tasks in each unit are anchored to what we would call a performance expectation and a standard. When we look at the standards themselves, there's a statement of what students should be able to perform within that science discipline or engineering problem. And getting them there is the application and understanding of the core ideas, the facts, identifying those cross-cutting concepts, and then applying those practices. So it's complex. When you look at the matrices of the standards, there's a lot going on. But when it all kind of focuses in to that performance piece, it's awesome. There's a clarity there.
All I can say is every time our teachers come and talk to us about a class or a new course that's going to be available to the students, it just gets me so excited. Like, I would just love to be in your classes. So it's very exciting to hear you guys talk about what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I'm just summing up, I know these two, myself, but also the department as a whole, appreciates the investment for the training. Going to New Jersey, working with Dr. Vanderveen, we know that's a cost, and it has paid off. Our teachers are utilizing that, as you can hear. So thank you for that support beyond just making it a curriculum. Thank you.
Before you go, can you?
Sure.
Can you Englishize this a little bit?
Sure.
Honors UBD,
So understanding by design,
okay, CAI,
our curriculum assessment and instruction system,
CC,
cross-cutting concepts,
and DCIS.
disciplinary core ideas.
Okay.
So
Gotta have
the-
the acronyms.
The top two are, is the Wiggins and McTighe framework for what we've been using with all our curriculum work, right?
Okay.
The training we've been doing as a district, K-12, how we build our courses, our curriculum, how we're leaning towards those transferable skills and not just facts. And that's part of our CAI system.
Great, thank you.
Canterbury School District.
Wow.
Just in case you didn't know.
Thank you, Tracy.
Questions for the science staff? Thank you all for a very
Excellent
good
job.
presentation.
Thank
Proud
you.
of the work.
And a little bit of play here.
We'll need our slinky
Yep.
back, yeah.
I was gonna investigate this further. I mean,
you.
you can borrow it. You can borrow it. Get it back at some point.
I'll just close up very, very quickly. Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. Thank you guys out there. So as you can see, we have a lot of great work going on with our academic program, with our new courses and our curriculum level maps for science and the professional development that's occurring to impact our students. That professional development that they discussed, we've also bled down into the 4th and 5th grade level, so we can create that vertical articulation moving up as we're working on designing our units for 4th and 5th grade and the pedagogy that goes behind the design of those units. So, as I said, you have 104 science curriculum level maps in front of you. They won't be board approved in the next board meeting to give you guys an opportunity to look through those maps. And then again, as you're viewing those, think of them through the 3 dimensions. So they're organized by the science and engineering practices, which are our transfer goals, but then you'll be able to see the performance expectations, AKA standards that are tied to that, along with our understandings, our knows, our do's, and our essential questions. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for homework.
Move on to item 5, facilities. 5.01, facilities planning recommendations. MMS site.
Over there. Yeah, so we want to be able to chat a little bit about some next steps with some of the facilities planning items that we had previewed for you a couple meetings ago. So very quickly, these aren't really the main topic for tonight, but we do continue to talk about a schedule and planning for the diving boards at the high school. We continue to have conversation about the potential of the next turf field and the timing of that and when to bring that forward. On that note, I'll mention that our girls soccer team is actually playing a home game tonight for the district semifinals. However, they have to play that home game over at Northern because our soccer field is not turf. So it's a very real instance there where the lack of a turf soccer field actually is a detriment to that team who has to go and play at Northern for their home game.
I have a dumb question, but our turf field at Memorial doesn't work for that?
It's not the right size.
I don't know.
It's a slightly
It's a
different
reasonable
question.
Yeah, close enough.
Only the difference between yards and meters is
Oh,
not much.
well,
They can play regular season games there, my understanding is.
Right, but
Correct.
not the
thank you.
playoffs.
All right, so it's not that crazy.
The playoffs have to be played on a meter.
Okay.
Ball goes in a net, not.
MESD.
But we continue to discuss several of these items, and one of the other ones that continues to take center stage here for us is the Upper Allen campus, specifically at the middle school, but we know that definitely bleeds out into Upper Allen Elementary and Shepherdstown Elementary. And really, the key question that we are asking ourselves when it comes to that campus and routing around that campus is how do we improve arrival, dismissal, and parking at the Upper Allen Township campus? We've navigated this in different ways over the last, say, about 10 years. We had a system that worked fairly well pre-construction. Some things were able to be worked out through the construction, particularly at Shepherdstown and locally to Upper Allen. We were able to separate the bus pickup and drop off from the parent pickup and drop off at both elementaries. But we also continue to have the challenge of parking really being a campus-wide, meaning all 3 building challenge. Sometimes, for example, for a period of time, we had the side parking lot at the middle school closed off to be able to facilitate buses coming in and out. And when we did that, that created a major parking issue at Upper Allen and Shepherdstown because there were a number of Upper Allen staff that were parking over there. And in the last 10 years, we've grown the number of staff members, not only our staff members, but additionally other staff that are contracted services, TSSs, behavior specialists that are working with students has grown tremendously over all 3 of those campuses. All those people have cars when they come to work with our students. So again, the parking challenges and transportation challenges across that campus have been real. So right now, just to give you a idea of what we're talking about, there's the middle school, and we've been talking about wanting to do a site study to really be able to have some experts from the area of engineering to be able to talk to us a little bit about what are they seeing, doing some counts of cars and being able to study it in some ways that really help us to do these 3 things on the side. We want to evaluate existing traffic circulation patterns, particularly at the middle school. Reimagine arrival and dismissal at MMS after we've evaluated those patterns. Really, that could involve some revision of current practices, and or it may involve, and this is what we're looking for information about, are there some site improvements that need to be made? For example, it was a number of years ago that we made the change where this was closed off here. This used to be open, some of you might remember. And it started to change the traffic pattern here on this part of the campus. Another small change that was made a few years ago was this little island here was always a little bit off-center. So we centered that up to be able to change the traffic pattern. So we're not sure that any site improvements that would take place would be major renovations. But we're very interested in having an engineer be able to study that to be able to help us figure out what would better traffic flow look like on this campus. And then finally, the third one, goal to eliminate vehicle backups and provide adequate parking for all school buildings. Talked a little bit about the parking, how that really is a 3-building issue right now. But even when we talk about vehicle backups, we do have times where vehicles for parent pickup are crossing out onto Market Street there. There have been times in really bad weather where it's been down towards the light, down here where the 7-Eleven is. There's other times where back here, when we used to do this a little bit differently, cars would be way back here. So really trying to make sure that we have adequate parking and eliminate those vehicle backups. So again, just to refresh your memory where it stands currently, but we've had different iterations of this over the past 10 years. Right now, this is really our bus pickup zone, and this is the parent drop-off zone over here. And thankfully also, we know that the arrival and dismissal times between this campus and these 2 campuses are different. So we are able to kind of clear things out from this arrival and drop off before we move into this. But it continues to be a congested area and one that we really want to be able to improve. So our first steps in this process are really to be able to look at some engineers that would be able to partner with us in this. And that really goes into what kind of plan could they put together to be able to help us to understand what is happening right now and how could we improve it. So Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Longwell looked at a number of different companies, and Mr. Hoffman's going to tell us a little bit more about the one that we'd like to go with.
Sure. Dr. Pitts, I'll let you take us forward as you.
I'll bring it
see fit. KCI is it's a nationwide firm.
All
right, thank you. Excuse me. A nationwide firm with a local office in Mechanicsburg. They've had a lot of local engagement projects in Upper Allen Township. In fact, just down the road, I think at the intersection, they've done work on. So they have a background of the area and have done some studies in the area already that we think would be very valuable. As you read through there, it seems to meet everything we would expect from a firm and what we're looking for. Before I get to the timeline, just also want to mention they stood out, in our opinion, with their proposal, and they went into a lot of detail, more than what we were even expecting. So it made us feel that they really are seeing things not just as a step-by-step basis of what we're asking, but taking it upon themselves to look ahead and already look down the road of what will the next steps possibly be. And it definitely stood out to us.
They have school experience.
They do. They do.
There's school experience, I think you mentioned Mr. Hoffman, excuse me. They're a national firm, so they have a depth of bench, but they also have a Mechanicsburg office. And so I know you've mentioned the value from a facilities perspective of having those consultants local and accessible.
Yeah, arm's length away that you can actually go see physically goes a long way. From our experiences, that it's not just an email you're waiting for. You can stop in and talk to somebody face to face, and I think that goes a long way. But they do have, not only school experience, but municipal experience, really across the board. In our timeline here, this is an initial tentative timeline. We're looking to hopefully appoint the engineer in November, do an analysis through January, and then after that, develop a solution between January and March, so we could possibly get this out to bid in April, and possibly a summer construction project if deemed necessary.
Again, ultimately, that construction aspect may not be much. We don't know yet. That's what the purpose of the study is. Perhaps there are some solutions even within the blacktop we already have up there that can be reconfigured, but we do anticipate that probably at least some sort of construction that would be involved, but we'll find out.
And do you have a kind of an idea or a ballpark on what you are hoping is the cap on spending this? Or it's kind of pretty much open to whatever at this point?
I think really we're just looking for some fresh eyes to see what they might recommend. We're not tied into that at all, but it would be nice to get a different perspective on things. We've looked at this over and over and over, and you kind of get stuck in what you think is going to work. And it'd be nice to get somebody else to give their opinion.
Okay. We know the study itself is 12,000, right? Just over 12,000. Yeah. So that would be what we're bringing to the board for approval of the engineer in November. Would be that one.
And I think Dr. Betts alluded to it a little earlier in the presentation. I think within that study, the first bullet point there, November to January, it's looking at the current site, having dialogue, meeting with the engineer, Crabtree Road Law, and talking about what is working well, maybe what are some areas where we know we need to make some improvements. And I think within that, is it current processes maybe just need to be changed, or to what degree might the site need to be adjusted? And I think I know your question about a number is a little hard to quantify without being able to, I think, step through those conversations to see, is it some of a process issue combined with the site? Because I'll draw a parallel with Elmwood Academy. When Dr. Bitts was there, he did a nice job working with administration and staff to kind of redesign, I'll say, the back of the site in terms of process. We really didn't adjust all the blacktop that had already been put down, but by dividing the 4th and 5th grade lanes the way we did with arrival and dismissal, it became quite efficient back there in terms of traffic flow.
As long as we
credit for that.
As long as we stay on the site, we don't have to deal with PennDOT.
It's not asked a question.
So PennDOT, that's straight, and if it's under an acre, then we don't have some of the other regulatory steps with the conservation district and stormwater. that
You
we
mean
need to do.
if a change would be made that was less than an acre to like pervious and
I was gonna
impervious?
say, I think we have a little more than an acre.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot of acres there, but if the change, to Mr. Rupp's point, is under an acre cumulatively, then it doesn't trigger those extra steps. And so we always look at that, Dr. Pitts, Mr. Hoffman, to what degree is PennDOT involved, to what degree is your township borough need to be involved, to what degree is the conservation district, the acreage that's impacted, so all of those are considerations.
So when they do this study, are they going to also be connecting Upper Allen? Because that could be the same flow, interconnecting those two schools, like,
Yeah, so
get better flow.
they'll study the site in totality, and we'll collect data on our buses, our cars, and then think about, because as Dr. Pitts shared, ultimately it's not just arrival dismissal, it's the interconnection with what's the arrival dismissal procedures, but parking and how's all that connected? Because on its face, it's easy to kind of think, well, it's just the middle school, but whatever dial we turn for the middle school has impacts on the other two elementary schools as well. And so I think we're putting a lot together.
So that's one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead. That's one of the challenges, again, that we are facing now, because the previous engineer that we had used when we did Shepherdstown and Upper Allen, all of their parking space counts included the entire campus. So there's some benefit in that, because they are interconnected campuses right now, because we added that road in between Shepherdstown and Upper Allen. So there's some benefit there. But the problem is that as soon as there's a change on any one of those three campuses, now there's a big impact on the other three. So as I was saying, when middle school said, hey, we're taking this whole section of parking spaces offline, now that has a huge impact on the other two buildings. So we have to look at all three, but we also have to be able to look at each one's operations individually to balance.
I don't see this being under an acre though.
I don't know that we know
Sort of stuff.
how much we really need to do if we can strategically use what we already have. And I think that's what we're hoping to do, is just let's figure out a way to use what we have. And if there are some changes that they recommend, let's consider them and try to keep them minor. But we really need to really take a hard look at what we can do.
I'm hopeful with your comment that, and the change of the company we're using to get fresh eyes, that will help this, because I also think this is the paradox of building bigger highways, right? They don't actually help, and the same idea of like, have we made it too accessible for cars to drop off kids, and and I'm not saying don't get me wrong, although it'd be kind of cool to say like, sorry, I got to take the bus, like my kid does, but like the idea, so long as the answer isn't we know we need 10 more parking spaces and we need to add all this space now build the analysis to support what we know we need, like that would be more worthwhile, which is what you're already saying. So that's good. My other question, are we should we also be studying the high school?
Yeah, I think there's some things that have dissipated from the beginning of the year at the high school. I think there's still some process things at the high school that can still be improved beyond what is there right now. But I don't see the same kind of lack of space being an issue there. I don't think we're to that point where we can say that. As the larger classes continue to make their way up there, will we start to feel a little bit more of a pinch? Perhaps, but there's still more things that we can do with the blacktop that exists there that I don't think we're to that point yet.
I agree, and I think with the high school, some of the issues we face have to do with some of the pinch that is on Broad Street. And I think,
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's something we can remedy ourselves.
I think maybe where they're a little bit different is from a process standpoint at the middle school, we are somewhat limited in that wherever you put the buses, it starts to intersect other issues or create other issues potentially. So like you put the buses in the side lot, well, that helps the bus situation and gives you a little better flow on the site, but then it wipes out parking over there, right? You know, and so it's that combination of where do you put the buses? And so that's some of the smaller site improvements. Maybe there's some very logical things that can be done around process and some site improvement that give us those options for process versus the high school. I think, you know, it is a newer building, and we were very purposeful in kind of separating the buses from the cars, from the car riders. And so I think to Dr. Bitt's point, we're probably just not that far along yet. It's more a process conversation.
Well, that's why I'm glad to hear that they have some school experience. The idea of they worked in the intersection down at the 7-Eleven. I wouldn't be submitting that with my proposal. I'm always in the wrong lane when I go through that intersection, and I want to go the other way. So.
I'll say this, with how robust their proposal was, they clearly have a good awareness of the area, and that was, I think, stood out to us, that it wasn't just, sometimes, you know, when you look at RFPs or you look at proposals, they kind of took what we wrote and then like give it back to us with a price, you know. Or this, they really put it through its paces, and I think gave it a lot of credit for that.
With the high school, I mean, one consideration there is the safety of the walkers. There's people parking on Broad Street, and the walkers have to cross through traffic to get to where they're going. And so, you know, it might be worth taking a look at that. You know, it's good that it dissipated. You don't have a lot of traffic on Broad Street.
Maybe let's see how they do here. Maybe we'll talk about that later.
There you go.
Unfortunately, that one's gonna take people following directions. That
Yes.
Well,
people aren't always.
the human element.
That's where you wouldn't unpack that, not to spend so much time on it, but we used to have that issue at Elmwood a long time ago where parents would park out on the street and then pull the walkers or the car riders out to and that caused its own set of issues, you know. And so when we can get habits, that's good habits, I think some of that stuff will help direction.
Any other questions for Eric? Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So again, we bring forward in November the approval of the engineer for the 12 months.
Move on to item 7, policy. Item 7.01, first reading of revised board policy 005, organization. 7.02, first reading of revised board policy 011, board governance standards code of conduct. 7.03, first reading of revised board policy 626, federal fiscal compliance. And 7.04, first reading of revised board policy 626.1, travel reimbursement federal programs.
These will all go to Mr. Longwell as long as his voice holds out.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Betts. Thank you, Mr. Rupp. I'll say the first one around 005, I wanted to just highlight a couple changes for the school board. One of the two things I wanted to call out in particular was there are several spots where there's just some clarification around the process for removal of officers of the board. It's really not changing what can or can't happen, but officers of like treasurer or secretary, just what's that process look like? And so it's just amended slightly in that regard. And then the other big change I wanted to mention too was around, I'll say, conflict of interest for consultants. And so just wanting to make sure that as a school district, we continue to employ an approach where we're making the decisions and we're not necessarily having a consultant come in or a contractor early on in the process that maybe pushes a decision that could favorably benefit themselves. And so I think probably a good example of that is if we were like the site here, if we brought in, instead of saying, hey, we're gonna have an engineer, a third-party consultant come alongside the district and give us recommendations, but we brought in a contractor and the contractor was gonna help us create the specifications and the contractor could also then simultaneously get the business, there could be a little bit of a conflict there, right? You know, and so we're just making sure to what degree do we make sure there's that independence and that we're not inadvertently creating any conflicts of interest. I think as a district, we already do a nice job of that, frankly. I think it's just capturing it here in policy because at a state level, maybe there's been some issues and PSBA has made some recommendations as a result of that. On to the next one, 011, so 11. When you look at, excuse me, this one, fair amount of red strike through, and then the additions there below. Really, it's just aligning our policy 11 for what really is PSBA's most recent recommendations around principles for governance and leadership. I think when you look at the green, the additions, it probably won't look all that new to you, because if you look at what we sign over there on the wall, it's similar to what we affirm every year as part of board reorganization. And so in some ways, it's just making that linkage and connecting up that policy 11 to what we've done from a practice perspective, I'll say. And then moving on to 626. So this one is an interesting one, and maybe a little extra context here for you. The first one is the policy itself, policy 626, federal fiscal compliance, the track changes version. That's the policy. The other 5, I'll say, are really kind of processes, protocols, best practices around what we do to manage our federal funds. In a lot of ways, those 5 probably would be more of administrative regulations if you think about how we usually structure policy and administrative regulations. But because of federal compliance guidelines and the requirements from the auditors, they're really looking for those to be at almost a policy level. And so we'll see these as attachments connected to 626. So I'll talk very quickly about 626 and then point out a few things about the other 5, if you will. When you review 626, there's some additional language around whistleblower provisions. And so I think policy, the federal government, there's definitely been more purposeful thought about whistleblower, conflict of interest, all of these different things. I mean, even in going back to policy 005, an added statement there about conflict of interest in consultants. And so I think in different aspects of policy, PSBA has been making recommendations around these things. Whistleblower in particular obviously protects if there's any kind of issues or conflict of interest that they've brought to light, that you can't go back and penalize an employee in that way. There's some other compliance requirement type things, I'll say, that we've added to the policy. Again, some of the things already in practice, but really just catching up with PSBA's recommendations. And so in that 626, you'll probably see language around cybersecurity and safeguarding, electronic records. You would see different requirements around record keeping, because we have to have certain extra steps that we take around inventorying of assets because they were purchased with federal dollars. It calls out the annual single audit if you're above $1 million. That's a threshold that Dr. Bitts and I care about, Mrs. Ely. Frankly, it's what we've always done. Single audits above $1 million, you have to have, a separate audit that really focuses on the compliance side of things. It's really just capturing it as part of board policy here and being explicit in that way from a compliance perspective. I think that covers the biggest pieces of the 626, the federal fiscal compliance. And then I'll just maybe mention, without going through all the other 5 individually, that those are respective areas of how we manage, certain respective areas of how we manage our federal programs. And so, for instance, cash management deals with the federal dollars that we might have on hand and what are requirements around that. Procurement is one. As the board knows, we deal with, we have our own kind of best practices around procurement at a local level. The state has another set of requirements around procurement, and the federal government has another set of requirements around procurement. Especially when it comes to federal and state, you can have a little bit different requirement or different standard. They don't align perfectly. And so we're always mindful of, obviously, what our local expectations are and state. But then if there's federal dollars involved, we also have to consider that extra level of what are the extra steps we need to take because it involves federal dollars. Allowability of cost is a big one. Allowability of cost really is another way to say, are we spending the money in a way that is intended or allowed, with those federal dollars? And really that's what the single audit checks as well, to make sure that not only are the dollars stated correctly, but that the expenses themselves are allowable and can be charged accordingly. Property management, talked a little bit about that from an inventory perspective, and then subrecipient monitoring. As a school district, and all the school districts in the state deal with this as well, Sometimes you hear about the pass-through monies, and so for us, we do pass some money through federal grants to our private schools, and then there's some requirements that go alongside that. So in a nutshell, 626, the main policy is that 626 federal fiscal compliance, and then the other 5 you see there are all dealing with certain aspects of how we manage those grants.
So are they officially part of policy 626?
Yeah,
Because it says attachment, and then it doesn't reference them anywhere in the policy that I could see.
Yeah, there'll be attachments, and so you'll see the 626, and then there'll be attachments. I think is how we have traditionally done it, or what we will do. Different than say, sometimes there's extra documents that PSBA or PNN, we get through the PNN, and those are more like, you just see them go into more of an administrative regulation because they're more day-to-day management type stuff, where these are going to live as directly connected to the policy 626.
So they're part of policy 626?
Yeah. It's actually, if you do look at the current 626, it's actually the way it's structured right now. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of 626, all of the attachments are listed.
Which is, and the board probably recognizes it is kind of unique in that we usually don't have it in that way. It's just because of being federal dollars, and they want to see it explicitly stated that way. The federal government, the auditors, the compliance auditors, those things.
So you'll have to show me that.
Sure. Okay. There's nothing else there. Moving on to 626.1, travel reimbursement federal programs. So really this is just discussing anytime there might be travel expenditures related to federal programs. And so I think when we look at that, if our staff were to go to a conference, but it really didn't involve federal dollars, then we obviously shouldn't be charging those travel expenditures to the federal programs. So it's just adding some clarity around instances where you may or may not charge travel expenditures against federal dollars.
Is there a reason that the federal program coordinator was taken out of there? I don't know if that's actually in the last policy more so than in this one, sorry. It was always, it's now just business manager instead of, and maybe it's just actually writing who's really doing the work.
Yeah.
As opposed to who used to do it. I mean, we never did it, it was just listed.
Yeah,
I didn't know if that was something they suggested or that was just something we did.
We actually probably should have picked one from that list of options to begin with.
Right.
But hadn't.
We just had them all there before.
Yeah, we just had them on the list.
Yes. And so bringing greater clarity to it and then tying it to the existing process. That's not to say that I think I do want to mention here Mrs. Ely and Mrs. Woodall, they do a tremendous job working together in managing all the federal programs, all the federal grants, and some of these policies are just a little bit of a glimpse into the work they do. As we've said during the budget process, that little 1% of federal dollars comes with a whole host of compliance requirements, and all of these policies are frankly examples of it, some examples of it. Not all inclusive, but some.
All right. Questions for Mr. Longwell? And we'll move these forward for a second reading on the 11th of November and any further discussion and vote. With that, the meeting is adjourned.